Okay, Hawk. Yeah, we're good, man.
Okie dokie. Well, just want to say hello, everybody. We're back again here doing a live webinar. This is Hawken with TOPDON, in case you haven't seen any of the videos, although I'm betting most of you who are following our social media have watched most of our videos, if not all of them at this point. Always stay tuned because we got more coming at all times. Today, we're going to do a webinar talking about our thermal imagers. And we're going to talk about some of the different uses that we can use these on. We're going to show you a couple of different things with the tools, talk about why you might prefer one format of thermal imager over another, just a few kind of basic things like that. We'll go through a couple of technical things as well, just to give you some technical use tips that you might find important when you are trying to, let's say, for instance, update your thermal imager. So there's a wide variety of different things to keep in mind with regards to keeping them updated. The form factor is going to kind of affect how you're doing that. But let's go through just some of the different products that we're going to talk about today. So we've got a wide variety of form factors. So we've got gun style ones like this, which you can see are fairly ruggedized, and we have a pretty wide array of products in that format. So if this is kind of your form factor preference and you want something that's self-contained and things like that, then this is probably more the product that you're going to want to look at. So the TC004 is the one I'm holding currently. I've got a TC005 behind the camera that we'll swap around and show you in a little bit here. All of the gun style ones have a tripod mount on them like this that you can see. The tripod mount will get her nice and close. So that is kind of a nice advantage if you're trying to use the thermal imager and keep it stable, maybe sample things over a long period of time. They do have lots of internal storage, and it is also possible to actually connect the TC004 and the 005 to a PC using a specific program. And I'll show you on the computer how you can get to that if you would like to install the PC software. We also have a self-contained Android tablet version, which is the TC003. So this also has a tripod mount on the bottom, which of course is nice. This has a user interface built in and everything, and also has a dual lens camera so that it'll do the thermal and the regular picture overlay, which in the gun style units, the TC005 also does. So if you want that little bit snappier, clearer image with the thermal overlaid on top of the actual object picture, then you can do that with either the TC003 or the TC005, as far as those two kind of self-contained units go. Now, we also have recently released the TC001 Plus, which has a dual lens like that as well. So that one also allows the thermal overlay with a regular picture natively within the app for this particular unit. That's kind of a feature a lot of folks that once they try it, they really fall in love with and becomes kind of the preference. And really the price difference isn't real big. So I think you're going to find that it's really worth the minimal price difference for the 001 Plus. Now, you're also probably asking, well, what's all the differences between all the other form factors or the other units we have? So we also have a zoomed in lens style, which is the TS001. And this particular unit has a focus ring on it, which can actually be good if you're doing like close-up circuit board analytics. You're trying to see if maybe some kind of an electronic device circuit board has a short in it or things like that. You can use this one because it has that focus ring, so you can get pretty close and then twist the focus ring. Really nice because of that feature. And again, good for specialized there. Now, you can also use that at a farther distance. So if you want to use, get a little bit more zoomed in picture from a distance, that focus ring also allows you to get things that are farther away. Now, it's not a telescope or a monocular or anything like that, but it definitely does get you a little bit more zoomed in picture. Then we have our original unit, which is the TC001. Now, we do make this in a USB-C for Android, but we also make this in a USB-C for Apple. They are separate and they do have different part numbers. They are not interchangeable. I also want to note that only the Android-based one will work with the PC software. So just something you want to keep in mind there. Now, with that being said, that one is just purely a straight thermal imager. That one is not kind of a dual lens or anything like that. We're just watching the comments here. So again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about our thermal imagers and kind of giving you a rundown of what the differences are of them right now. And then we're going to cover a little bit more about technical usage, updating the apps, kind of just going through all the different stuff related to the hardware as a whole. Now, some of the other things you want to keep in mind when using your thermal imager is when we're looking at the temperature gradient, and we'll pull up the app here so you can see. When you're looking at the temperature gradient, aka the color map, it's important to remember that the color map is a differential temperature measurement. So if everything in the frame is virtually the same temperature, they will also be, everything in the picture will be virtually the same gradient or color. So that's something to keep in mind. So some people will look at an object or a group of objects and kind of ask themselves, hey, why do I see all the same color? So you can see I'm much warmer than the room around me. And I am, in fact, actually in a garage that is heated, but not heated very hot. So you can see I'm wearing a sweatshirt and whatnot as well, which is why. So if we look here, though, we can see in the picture, I am the hotter image, and we can see the temperature gradient. Now, if we turn this towards the desk is mostly one continuous color, and that's because it is one uniform temperature. So again, remember that your thermal imager is a differential measurement tool. So you're asking, well, what does this do for me in terms of, let's say, automotive diagnostics? It's important to remember if we're dealing with automotive diagnostics and our thermal imager, we can use this for a wide variety of uses. So a good example would be, and this is probably the most common one that people typically think of, is finding fuses or relays that are flowing current. Now, it's also important to remember if we're looking at fuses or relays and we're trying to determine if one of them is active or current is flowing, there has to be a certain amount of current flowing. And there isn't a spec per se, but there has to be enough current flowing through it for it to generate a little bit of heat, because a fuse is in fact a resistance in the circuit. And that fuse is also going to create a small amount of heat as current flows through it. So in many cases, if you have a really high rated fuse, you might be able to see that light up when a significant amount of current is flowing through it. If you have a really small fuse, like a 5 amp fuse, and you only have 500 milliamps flowing through it, it's possible that you may not see much temperature differential there. And again, that's because a very small amount of current is flowing through that circuit. So just something to keep in mind when you are using these specifically for fuses and relays. Now, another electrical related thing you can use your thermal imager for is finding resistance. And when I say resistance, I mean sources of resistance that are not there by design. A great example would be if you have corrosion on a positive or negative battery terminal or a cable, or let's say you have a melted wiring harness that is causing a resistance. If there is electrical resistance in the circuit, that will cause a heat buildup in relation with that resistance buildup. That is something you can pick up with a thermal imager. So if you have a short or a high resistance point in a wiring harness or a connection, you can often pick that off specifically with a thermal imager. So something to keep in mind there when you are using your thermal imager for automotive diagnostics. Now, there are a number of other uses you can use your thermal imager for that are also automotive in nature. I'm just taking a look here, and yeah, we got a bunch of questions that are not related to thermal imagers, but we do have one on thermal imagers here. So we're going to look at the thermal imager here. Okay, so, or the question. So TC002. Okay, so we have someone who's a little bit concerned about the clearance, for instance, in attaching the thermal imager to a phone that has an OtterBox. Well, as a matter of fact, I use an OtterBox on my iPhone as well. The best solution you're going to find for that is the mount. If you use the mount is available separately, by the way. You can clip the mount onto your phone. These are spring-loaded. You can clip the mount onto the phone. You can actually stick the thermal imager inside the mount. And I'll just stick it in here and clip it in. Clip it in. You can see that the connector protrudes out here. We'll put it up close to the camera there so you can see it. And then you can route your cord into the phone, and this is ruggedly mounted on the phone, and also a protective case that will help protect the camera itself. So if you're having issues with clearance connecting it to, let's say, a phone with a large rugged case, This rugged case for the thermal imager is your best solution because this makes it easy then to use the small short cord that comes with the camera. Excuse me. I can understand if you don't have this mount, why it would be difficult to use the thermal imager with a little cable, right? It's a little short cable. Maybe you're kind of annoyed having to hold, here the camera and the short cable. Well, you can also keep in mind that you could buy a much longer USB-C cable if you'd like to use your thermal camera more like a periscope, so to speak. You could connect that thermal imager using a longer cable and then manipulate it and move it around in order to access places in the whatever place you're trying to reach. I know people will use it for under dash to find resistance points in wiring under a dash, shorts, things like that. So if you do have a longer cable for it, you can kind of snake it into places where you cannot maybe get a larger thermal imager in some cases. So it's kind of a advantage and disadvantage at the same time, depending on how you're trying to use it. Again, if you get the rugged mount case, you can clip this onto your phone, and that alleviates the kind of nuisance of having the little stub cable. Now, again, every thermal imager is going to have to get into the USB-C port fully seated. That's normal. And, as much as that's a nuisance and whatever, that is really a function of having a rugged case. There are a lot of different accessories you use either for iPhone or Android where it will not clear the case. And again, that's a function of the case design, not a function of the camera design itself, like the thermal imager, right? So just want to clarify that a little bit. I'm just looking at the comments here. Now we have a question about using a thermal imager to set a driver's door switch. I'm not entirely sure that I understand that question. So if you want to clarify exactly what you're talking about with that, that would be awesome, and I will try to answer that question. I'm just looking here. So got a question on using the Phoenix scope. We're not going to cover anything scope related on this webinar, but we definitely are going to do some scope related webinars in the future. If you have not watched our webinar on scopes, if you go to our YouTube channel and click the live tab on the YouTube channel, there is a 2-hour webinar on the YouTube channel that we did cover a bunch of different basic scope setup stuff. So definitely go check that out if you have not watched that video yet on the oscilloscope. So I'm just looking here. So again, anyway, if you're having any issues getting the camera to seat on a phone, please do check out the rugged mount case. That really does alleviate some of the difficulties with using the kind of stub cable with your thermal imager. And again, of course, the side effect being is it also does help protect and hold the camera, which there's no downside to that, right? Now that does come in conjunction. If you order the TS001, it does come with it. Now, I don't know if eventually we'll offer it without, but currently right now it is offered together. So you do get that included in that setup. Again, the rugged case mount is also available separately. So just something to keep in mind when you're asking about getting it to clear the case, so to speak. So awesome. Okay, so we got that covered. Sweet. I'm just watching the comments here. So please do go ahead and put comments down there if you have questions about things, anything we can address with the thermal imagers. Again, our focus today is primarily on thermal imagers. We're going to really try to stay as much in that lane as we can. If there's quick, easy questions on other subjects, I will definitely try to address those. But again, our primary focus today is going to remain with thermal imagers. Now, keep tuned because we are going to do additional webinars on a variety of subjects. And, if you do have specific requests for subject-based webinars, feel free to put those in the comments. I already saw the one on scopes, and rest assured, we're definitely going to do some webinars on the scopes. There is almost limitless ammunition for things we could cover on a scope, right? And of course, that is always an enjoyable webinar to put on. So getting back to the thermal imagers and our discussion with automotive-related uses, some of the other things that you can use them for, obviously one that comes to mind for a lot of people would be seat heaters. So we do see the usage for seat heaters. We can see burned out grids in a seat heater. We can see a non-functional seat heater. We can see if there is one pad, usually you have an upper and a lower pad on a seat. You can see if one pad is much cooler than another, and that will allow you to determine whether or not one is functioning correctly and the other one maybe is not, right? Let's say the customer reports, hey, I've got a problem with the lower seat heater, the butt pad. Maybe it's not heating up as much, or I feel like it's not heating up as much. Well, remember, Perception is a subjective thing, so being able to test that with your thermal imager is obviously important. The other thing you can do is provide pictures and documentation to the customer reporting that issue so that they can see, yes, in fact, there is a problem, or no, it's your perception. It is not, in fact, reality. They are the same temperature. So again, just a simple note to keep in mind when using your thermal imager. Now, that's still not the limit of what you can do with a thermal imager when it comes to automotive applications. We also have the ability with our thermal imager to find mechanical resistance. Now you're asking, what are you talking about? Mechanical resistance? Huh? Mechanical resistance would be something like brakes. That one is probably the most commonly picked up on as far as the thermal imagers go. So brakes, let's just say we're looking at a left front and a right front brake rotor. We would expect, if we have been driving and braking and traveling in roughly a straight line, or taking roughly an even number of left turns and right turns, loading the suspension and the brakes similarly, we would expect a fairly symmetrical temperature on both front brake rotors, right? They are symmetrical in design, and therefore they are also likely to be fairly symmetrical in temperature once they have been activated and used roughly an even amount. Now, when we say symmetrical, what are we talking about? Roughly a 10% variance or less is what we're looking for in most cases. 10% is kind of the general basic rule of thumb, so to speak, where you can start feeling like that maybe has some meaning, right? Now, if it's more than 10%, well, you probably have something going on there if there is more than a 10% variation between two symmetrical components. Now, we can use that for a lot of other uses. And one of the cool things you'll find, specifically on the TC003, and we'll get you into the app here. I'm going to actually stand up and get over to the camera and switch to a little bit more zoomed in lens for you so you can see this. So one of the things on the app that we do have here is we actually have this professional testing tab. So if we click on that and we click vehicle detection, we can actually tap this down here on the bottom, and it will give us a nominal temperature range for a wide variety of components. Now, this is not gospel, right? This doesn't come from a vehicle manufacturer, so you can't live and die by this information per se, but it's kind of a good general guideline. So let's say, for instance, we have an ignition coil, and we want to look at an ignition coil. We're going to have a general temperature range inside the engine bay. Now, some of that's going to be dependent on if the hood's been closed for a long period of time or it's open or whatnot. But you get a general temperature range here. So 104 to 158 Fahrenheit. Of course, I have it in Fahrenheit because I'm in the US, but you get a general temperature guideline. And remember, because vehicles have more than one ignition coil, we can easily look across each ignition coil and look for more than a 10% variance. Now, if we have more than a 10% variance, it is very possible, if we have a symptom that could be related to ignition and we have more than a 10% variance on one of the ignition coils that maybe correlates with a misfire, that may be something significant we want to pay attention to. So again, kind of a cool feature that you do have in the app here that gives you some basic things you can look at just as far as temperature ranges for basic guidelines. Now, we also have a house detection feature. So let's say, for instance, you want to do kind of an energy analysis to see if your house is losing heat in one particular spot. We can literally do a home inspection and attach a bunch of images to it. And this will allow us to create a really nice little report for a customer to show somebody.
Hey, Hawk, your camera's cut out.
Oh, it did. Well, what on earth? Okay. Don't know what happened there. That's nice. We'll plug it back in and see what happens. There we go.
Yeah, it's back. You're good, man.
Oh, today has been a day of AV issues, I gotta say. It has not been smooth. So I'm glad you folks are still here hanging in, and sorry about the technical difficulties. So anyway, when we're going with the feature of the house report, that is really helpful for a home inspector because you can create a PDF report. I would encourage you, if you're in the automotive space, you can obviously upload and add images like thermal images to your inspection reports for your customers. If you are a consumer, you can obviously use this to find faults on your vehicles uh, without any additional assistance, which is kind of nice. So it really has a lot of uses. Certainly, even the home energy analysis aspect is really helpful. Let's say, for instance, we have an issue with maybe we feel like our heater is switching on more. Maybe you're using an advanced thermostat at your house that actually monitors your energy usage. And if you're able to track relative temperatures in your area, and of course, you can find that on weather web pages and things of that nature. If, say, for instance, your heater is switching on more frequently and the temperature has remained relatively steady, that could indicate that maybe you have some kind of a leak somewhere. Maybe there is an issue at play. If that happens to be the case, then of course, that would be something we'd want to be concerned about, right? So, really, a whole lot of uses here for a thermal imager, both inside and outside the automotive field. Now, I'm just going to take a pause here and look at our pictures. So, we have a question on. Oh, okay. So we had a misunderstanding on the topic of the stuff. So we are, yes, today we are not actually handling the scan tools, but we can definitely talk about scan tools again. We'll do another webinar on scan tools. We did one last time, but that was, one subject focused. Well, there is, again, tons of ammunition when it comes to using the scan tool. So we'll definitely have a lot of future webinars on a variety of subjects. And we do monitor the comments. So if we have a lot of requests for a specific type of webinar, we will try to create a webinar around that. So we have a question on the TC004 using it with the PC. Now we are going to show you that. That's going to be slightly more difficult to show you, but we're going to do our best to show you how that works. So I am actually just going to finish up what I was talking about here with the automotive aspect of usage, and then we will switch over and we'll show you how to connect to the PC. And we will show you how to use both the standalone units, or excuse me, the app-based units like this with the PC, as well as using the standalone units like this with the PC. Now, there is a small note that we'll discuss when we get to that, but rest assured we are going to cover that today. So the other aspect I was mentioning with respect to automotive here is we do want to keep in mind that we can also use thermal imagers on other mechanical components. So things like suspension. When there is an increase in friction, and again, this could be friction that is not by design, right? Brakes have friction by design, a certain amount of friction. When the brake pad grips the rotor, that is designed friction. On the other hand, if we have things rubbing, if we have bearings that have worn out, that will create additional friction. If lubricant inside a sealed bearing case has perhaps washed out because there's been salt water that got in there, like a hub bearing, if you have noise and you have an increase in friction, you will also have an increase in heat. So another way that you could find out, let's say, for instance, you think you have a bad wheel bearing. If you take your vehicle for a good long ride, let's say maybe an hour, and you try to load the suspension relatively evenly, right? Take a few clover leaves going around down one direction and then try to take some clover leaves going the other direction, and then get your vehicle in a spot that you can get underneath it, whether that's with a lift, or if you are able to, you have a truck, maybe you can slide under without a lift. And then you're going to use your thermal imager on the back of each hub bearing. And again, we're going to compare symmetrical components. So if we have a left front and a right front, they should be fairly symmetrical in temperature and therefore very similar in color, right? Color being what the thermal imager shows you. They will also be, if you're comparing the rears, again, roughly within 10% of each other for temperature. If, however, you have one that is failing internally, you're likely going to have an increase in internal friction, which is going to generate more heat. The longer you drive the vehicle, the more that effect is going to be exaggerated, right? So then you can bring the vehicle back into your garage and either lift it up or slide underneath, however it is. And of course, always be safe about it. But once you get your thermal imager under there, you'll be able to see which one is actually hotter than the others. And typically, it's pretty obvious. But again, a simple thing you can use your thermal imager for on automotive. So now, let's go ahead and we'll switch over and we'll talk about the PC. So I'm going to minimize my chat and everything here. And I'm going to change my camera lens so that we're zoomed in so you guys can see my computer screen really well, because that's what we need in order to be able to show you the PC stuff. So we're going to zoom out a little bit. That was a little too close. And I'm just going to adjust the screen here so you can see. And I'll try to keep my big fat head out of the way. So just a moment here. All right, so you can see the PC screen now. Now, I'm going to grab one of the cables, just a little bit longer cable, because the one that comes with the smaller app-based cameras is not super long, and I do want you to be able to see how I've got it set up. So I'm going to go over to the USB port, and again, just don't mind my fat head here. And I will not be checking the comments just while I'm setting this up, simply because I can't have both screens up simultaneously here. All right, so I have a USB cable here, USB-C, and I have the TC004 here, as you can see. I'm going to turn on the TC004, and there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind when you are setting up your thermal imager for use with the PC. Whoops, I guess I didn't hold the power button long enough. We'll give her a second here. All right, so it's going to boot up. Give it just a moment here. Okay, system's initializing. All right. Now, this setting that I'm going to show you is the same basic setting on the TC004 and the 005. So we're going to go into the menu. We're going to hit that little center button right there. And then we're going to go over to the little gear. We're going to hit setting. Okay, you can see that. And we're going to go down here. Keep arrowing down. System setting. USB mode. Whoops, fat fingers missed it. USB mode. USB camera is what we want it on. So this is the setting you need it for if you are going to run it off the PC. And after you hit OK, if it's not already on this, you will have to restart the device. Ours is already set up correctly. So now we're going to take you over to the PC here, and we are going to show you. We need to go to, and I'm going to make a new tab so you can see here. We're going to go to www.topdon.com, and I'll turn the PC towards you a little bit here so you can see it just a little better. All right, so we're on topdon.com, and anytime you need to download a program for any of the products that you are using, this is the website you want to go to, www.topdon.com. Once you've done that, we're going to click on the related product that we want to use with the PC for the thermal imaging. So the first one we're going to use is the TC001 right here. We're going to click on that product, and then we're going to click on the download button right in the top center. Okay? And then you see we have apps for Android, because this is the TC001, which is an Android device. But we also have the Windows app. So Android, this is the older app for Android. This is the newer app for Android, and you want the newer app. Now, also note that there are different versions for different versions of Android, so you want to make sure you get the right version for your version of Android. If you do not know how to figure out what version of Android you have, just do a Google search on your particular Android device, and there should be a video showing you how to find what Android version you have. It's going to be in the system settings if you're not familiar. All right. So now we're going to click on download for Windows. Now, spoiler alert, I have already downloaded it, so I don't actually need to download it, but you're going to download the app for Windows and install it. So once we've done that, we're going to click on it, and I have it down here in my toolbar. And I'm going to click on TC right here. So that's thermal camera. I'm going to close my Microsoft Teams so we don't get disruptions here. So we have the thermal camera app open. So it's TC is what it's labeled. We have the thermal camera app open. We're going to take our USB-C cable right here. We're going to open up the little flap on the top of the TC004 or 5, whichever you're using. We're going to plug it in. You're going to hear the little Windows boobity boop sound. And then you're going to go up here in the top left corner of the app, and there's a tab that says Connect Device. And typically speaking, I should be able to get it to connect, and watch, it's probably not going to work now because I'm trying to get it to do it on camera, right? This is always how it goes. All right, so we're going to close it. We're going to reopen it. Oh, you know what? I'm a dummy. I had the wrong one open because I've got my apologies. I'm putting the cart before the horse here. I've got my wires backwards, so to speak. That's right. We were doing the app-based units first, not. Okay, I killed Teams, and it's not. Okay, go away. Quit Teams. There we go. All right, so my apologies. I am apparently derping out here, and I've got the incorrect app open. I was supposed to be grabbing the TC001, not the TC004. So my apologies. That's a biff on my part. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to switch over and get the right camera connected, and then it will actually work, right? All right. So we've got our cable connected, the one that comes with the TC001. We've already got the PC app downloaded. And again, it's TC. We're going to connect it. Okay. You hear the little boobity boop sound that Windows loves to make when it does like a bunch of fun stuff. And then here we see connecting device. And if we click on thermal camera, boom, up it comes. So when you actually get the correct app and the correct camera together, everything works like it's supposed to. So it kind of helps, right? If you get the two together that are supposed to be there. So that's how you can use the TC001. Now, I can also disconnect that one, and we'll plug in the TC001 Plus. So we're going to switch over here, and we will go connecting device. And again, Windows has a epic meltdown as it's trying to get everything sorted. We're going to connect the new thermal camera here, and look at that. So now we've got the TC001 Plus. That one is now connected. We can take pictures, we can take videos, we can do all of that awesome stuff. Temp measurements, you name it. We're not going to get into the super deep stuff right now on individual stuff related to the app. If you want to go through that, let us know in the comments, and we'd be happy to create another webinar in the future where we go through the PC suite in depth. Always happy to do that, right? So that's how you connect the app-based units to the PC. Again, it does need to be a Windows-based computer, not Macintosh or Linux, but that is the basics of connecting the app-based one. So now I'm going to quit this app, and I'm going to open the app for the TC004 and the TC005. So again, my apologies, I had my stuff backwards there when we first went to setup. So now, if we're back on the TOPDON page, we're going to go to all the way back up. My mouse is being dumb, so time out. So we're going to go back up here to Thermal Imagers, mouse over. We're going to find TC004 or 5. Since we're just doing the PC suite, it doesn't matter which one we pick. We're going to go to download. I'm going to click on it. And here's the Windows download here. So once we do that, now, and also here is your firmware updates in case you didn't know. Read these carefully. They are for specific units, and you do need to go into the settings menu in order to determine which one yours has if you're going to update the firmware. I do encourage you to keep your firmware updated as new features get added and the software gets improved on the units. So it's definitely worthwhile to do that. Now, I've already got the Windows software downloaded, so we're going to minimize this window for you, and we're going to pull it up. And the PC version is called TD View instead of TC View. So it's going to boot up, and I'm going to plug in my USB-C cable here. And we hear Windows acknowledge it's plugged in. And then we are going to go online analysis, and we're going to click on the camera, online analysis. We'll give it a second here. Watch, now I broke it, right? There we go. And so now we've got the TC004 connected to our PC. And again, the 5 would be the same process, right? Connected to the PC via the same program. Again, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details and everything on how to use the PC suite today, just the basics of how we get connected And look at that. So there's my garage door. Do you think I happen to have a cold air leak gap at the bottom? Oh, yes, I do. I definitely need some better seal and insulation at the bottom of my garage door. So, yeah, just a great example there of holy moly, what a difference. Now look at the laptop there. You can see how much heat the laptop is generating, right? And there's my hand. Now, if you guys have never done this or checked out just how incredibly accurate and sensitive these things are, check this out. So we're looking at the desk. The desk had the thermal imager sitting on it before. Let's go over here where nothing has been really sitting on the desk. Watch this. I'm going to put my hand on the desk. I only had it on there for just a split second, and look at how much you can see, and you can watch as the heat evaporates or dissipates, the handprint vanishes. So you can tell these cameras are incredibly sensitive and very good at picking up even the slightest differences in temperature. So anyway, that was what I wanted to show you with regards to connecting to the PC suite. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this app, and I'm going to go back to our chat and just see if I've missed anything. All right. Okay, so no questions that we are missing currently. Just a question about if we are going to release a borescope in the future. Currently, the answer is we don't have one, but that may change in the future. Definitely something, an area of opportunity, I guess I would say. Now, I will point out that if you have, for instance, the Ultra Diag, one of our Android-based tools, you can, in fact, install apps like borescope apps. So if you have an existing borescope that is Android-based, you most certainly can use it with that. Now, you can also use all of the Pro Series TOPDON scan tools can, in fact, use the thermal imagers that are app-based. So like, for instance, the 001 Plus, you plug that right into the USB-C port, and it'll ask you if you want to launch the app, and we'll say yes, and we'll launch, and we'll hit confirm, okay, confirm. And we'll give it a second, and look at that. Wow, that is insane, right? Pretty lifelike and crazy. But anyway, the compatibility is pretty wide with these, so you can use these with most Android devices. Again, double check when you look at the apps to see if it's the correct version, the right Android operating system. Most devices at this point are all working on Android 7 or newer. That's pretty common. So in most cases, you're not going to run into too many issues with compatibility there. But just something to keep in mind if you are curious specifically about Android compatibility. Now, as far as the Apple-based stuff, we're not, there's not a whole lot as far as compatibility we have to talk about with regards to that. But the one thing I will mention with the Apple is the USB-C and Lightning do have adapters for both. So we do have an option where you can basically use one or the other with your existing device. The only difference, and some people have asked, well, why can't you use the USB-C TC001 with an Apple? The way that the hardware physically talks to the software does not work the same way on an Android as it does on an Apple. And excuse me, you can thank Apple for that. They do like to be different. And there are pluses and minuses with anything like that. One of our personnel loves to give Apple a hard time on a regular basis for that very reason. But again, that's one of the reasons why you cannot use the TC001 specifically with the Apple hardware. So just a small note there. Now, as far as the other stuff goes, you can use any of the other app-based units with your Pro Series, so your Phoenix Max, your Phoenix Plus, your Phoenix Plus 2, your Lite 3, any of those will work just fine, specifically with the app-based units. And again, if for some reason you don't have the thermal imaging app on your TOPDON scan tool, you can visit the TOPDON.com website and download the APK or app directly from the website and install it. And typically speaking, that's going to work without issue. Now, if you do have an issue getting it installed and you need some help, just give our folks at the hotline a call. And of course, you do see the notes in the chat. The TOPDON hotline is on there. All right, so we're just checking the comments to make sure we don't have anything missing. So do we have any questions specifically on any of the stuff that we've talked about with regards to the thermal imagers as of now? I'd like to answer any of your specific questions with the thermal imagers as possible now. Nothing specific. Okie dokie. Well, let's go ahead and we'll move on a little bit here, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do with our thermal imagers. Now, I had a friend who was dealing with a very difficult concern on a vehicle that had a battery draw. Now, this is something we do get questions on with some level of regularity, and it's a little bit challenging to use a thermal imager just for diagnostics in the sense that we're going to do a draw test, unless you are thoughtful about your setup. And when I say that, you need a vehicle to be at a thermal equilibrium before you use your thermal imager. So for instance, my garage is a consistent. Okay, we just got a couple of comments here. I'm just double checking. You need to have a consistent temperature environment when you set up a vehicle to do a draw test. So let's say, for instance, my garage is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I would want to let the vehicle sit in the garage overnight and equalize in temperature fully before I conduct or undergo a draw test in order to determine if there is something flowing current, something keeping the vehicle awake, things of that nature. We need to let the vehicle fully go to sleep. We need to let the vehicle fully equalize in thermal temperature. Once we do that, then we can set up our thermal imager on a tripod. Now, I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see this. And we're going to show you here. So this might be something you're going to do, and I'll try to not knock my tripod down here. So this might be something that you're going to do if you are trying to do that form of diagnosis, right? So if we're trying to do a draw test here, we're going to get our thermal imager set up. Now, it may have powered itself down, so just give me a second. Or I powered it down. So we're going to get our thermal imager set up, and we're going to aim it at the fuse block or wherever it is that we need to monitor. Maybe we think there's a purge valve with a short. Maybe we think there's a crankcase breather heater that has a short in it. If we have that, we're going to want to aim the thermal imager directly at that. And then I would recommend, number one, you make sure your thermal imager is fully charged up. But quite frankly, your best option in many cases on that is going to be to get a small clamp and usually use the app-based units, because the app-based units don't have a battery in them. So they can effectively run off any PC that's AC powered indefinitely. Now, whether or not this camera will stay powered up the entire time you have it set up is dependent on the battery and whether or not it continues to charge. And that's going to be a function of your USB port on your computer, whether or not it can output enough power to keep this charged while it is actually running. So just keep that in mind when you're setting this up. Now, I would definitely recommend using the PC suite if you are going to do any form of thermal imaging, long-term draw test, diagnosis type stuff. That is definitely how you would want to use that. So we're just going to move this up a little bit so you can see inside the engine bay here. Now, we're just trying to show you good practice here so that you can get some feel. If you look at our thermal image right now, everything in the engine bay is virtually equal in temperature. That's because nothing is powered up right now. This vehicle has not been run or operated for any period of time, and it's been sitting in the garage overnight. So we don't have any concerns over unequal temperatures in the engine bay. And if we were going to do a draw test at this point, this would be the proper setup, right? This vehicle has reached an equilibrium, and therefore it is prepared for us to carry out a draw test. I'm just looking at the questions here. So one of the questions we had was, is it best to use a different device with your thermal imager versus, let's say, the scan tool? Honestly, it's really just a preference thing. If you would like to use a separate device, you certainly can. Now, some people like to use something like the ultra diag, and we'll just bring you back into the frame here so you can see the ultra diag. Time out. I'm going to move this here. Now, we're going to get our camera moved back over, so just stand by for a second as we switch. All right. So one of the things that we might prefer And one of the things I talk about specifically with the Ultra Diag is because it's a all system scanner, but also has a camera on it and also many USB ports, is you would be able to install like the Yahoo Mail app. So I have the Yahoo Mail app installed on here. I just downloaded and installed that myself. And then I can basically email thermal images off of the Ultra Diag to a shop management system, to a Google Drive account, anything of that nature. And I can also use like the BT Mobile Pro S battery tester and generate battery testing reports. So basically, it becomes like an all-in-one digital inspection tablet, right? So at that point, we can basically do, hey, we're going to use the Ultra Diag app. We're going to scan all systems on the vehicle with the dongle, right? And then we're going to maybe whip out our thermal imager. And let's say the customer has a low battery voltage condition, and they've got erratic behavior on some of the electrical components on the vehicle. Well, maybe we plug in our thermal imager into the Ultra Diag and we walk over to the car and, oh, lo and behold, the positive battery terminal is all corroded, and maybe the primary battery cable on the positive side is got excessive resistance. And I have seen that before where it's partially, it's basically developed internal resistance in the cable itself. And then we'd be able to generate a pre-scan for the vehicle, as well as email out a thermal image right off of the tablet. So if you go ahead and install an on or an offboard email app like the Yahoo Mail, so we'll go back here to home. Okay, stop that. We're going to just go back to home here. Just going to close all the apps. But if we go back to our home screen and we go to the Yahoo Mail app, then we would be able to attach a thermal image and email it to ourselves. And of course, the Ultra Diag app already emails out reports specifically from the Ultra Diag app. And it also has the ability to email out battery and starting and charging system tests. So you'd be able to create a fairly comprehensive report using the Ultra Diag with your thermal imager. So I view the Ultra Diag as a really good pre-scan, post-scan, data collection kind of tool. So with your question to regards of, do you need to use a separate device or not? Again, mostly just a preference thing. It's not necessarily you have to or you should. It's, do you prefer that? Do you like to centralize everything on one device, or would you prefer to have separate devices for something? Now, for me, I also like using it with the phone, because our phones are very, very good at connectivity, right? They have you can get every app for your phone. You can email, you can upload, you can do anything and everything with your phone. So for me, I definitely really do like using the case and then using the thermal imager with the phone. Now, I will also say I'm one of those guys who uses an Apple. So my options for variety of thermal imagers are a little bit less than if I have an Android device. So in many cases, if I want to use, let's say, for instance, my TC001 Plus, I'm going to use it with the Ultra Diag because I don't have an Android phone. So that's one of those situations where, again, depending on what you own, from a hardware perspective, is going to affect whether or not it's the better fit. Now, I do know a lot of guys really like the form factor of the TC003, simply because it is a miniature tablet in its own housing. I've also installed the Yahoo Mail app on this tablet, and I've been able to email thermal images to myself off of here as well, which is typically the fastest way to get them off the tablet. Videos can obviously be a little more challenging because they're larger and you get limited on your attachment size by the email providers. So just something to keep in mind there. But again, whether or not you want to use it with the PC, an Android, or with an Apple device is going to depend on which imager you purchase and then also what your personal preference is. Now, I will say if you do use it on the PC suite, it's really convenient because obviously you have the images right on the PC. So if you have, let's say you work in a shop and you have a laptop, well, I mean, just taking the thermal image with the laptop, if you already use the thermal or the laptop for service information and repair info and anything of that nature, get yourself a big long USB-C cable, plug in your TOPDON thermal imager, take the picture through the PC suite and save it right on the computer and upload it to your digital shop management that way. So it's really, there's a lot of options and kind of wide latitude. Now, the other thing I will mention, and this hasn't hit all of the thermal imaging products yet, but it will in the near future. There is a new feature called TISR, which is basically an image enhancement technology that you will see on the apps as well as on many of the gun style, at least the TC004 and 005 in the future. Now remember, the TC004 and 005 do require you to update the firmware manually using the USB cable. Now, if you're not familiar with how to do that, there are good instructions that are on each web page for the 004 and 005. It's not too bad of a process, but it requires more work on your part than if, of course, you have a app-based, whether that's on your phone, on Android tablet, or the self-contained unit. Those are obviously a little bit more self-updating and self-maintaining. So there is a little more work involved in keeping these updated than there is in the other form factor. So let's just check and see if we have any other specific questions or comments on the thermal imagers. It looks like we don't. Okay, good. So just wanted to say, I really appreciate you coming to watch our thermal imaging webinar and kind of talking about all the different uses that we can leverage our thermal imagers for, the different form factors that we have at our disposal, why you might choose one versus another, what you can do with them. If you haven't gone and watched our thermal imaging video we have on our YouTube channel, we do have about a 40-minute training that talks about and shows some use case example images of the thermal imager in action on a variety of applications. I would love to be able to show you live on a car, but of course I would have to have a bunch of broken cars in front of me, and I don't currently. So we do have a webinar that does go through and show you some of those images of the real world use cases, so you can look at those and kind of get a feel for, well, what does it look like real on a car? Again, if I had a broken car, it'd be a little bit easier to show you that, but I don't currently, so I encourage you to go watch our YouTube video on that. So as far as other stuff goes, again, if you have questions about specific stuff, if there are use cases you're struggling to understand the best way to use the products, if you have suggestions or thoughts about how we can make improvements to the products, we would absolutely love to hear that. We really do try to solve problems when they come up. And we do really want to create products that you're excited to buy and use on a daily basis. Our products are designed to make your life easier in your professional space, in your personal home, whether we're trying to optimize our energy efficiency, find ways to cut down our heating and cooling bills, etc., things like that. We really do want to create a product that is helpful to you on a regular basis that you find value in. So we really appreciate you coming to watch our webinar. We hope that you'll join us on the next one. And of course, like, subscribe, and share our YouTube channel. That is always appreciated. And, we really do enjoy the interaction we have with our customers. We learn a lot from you. I know you learn things from us, but it is a two-way street. We learn things from our customers, and it does help us make better products for you and improve our existing products. So just wanted to say thank you for that. Hopefully you get an opportunity to join us on our next webinar. We have not announced anything as far as what it will be on, so stay tuned and make sure you subscribe to our Instagram, YouTube, and of course, any of our other social media channels. It's always worth following because you never know when we're going to give you another webinar with info. Of course, we do record these and they will be on the YouTube channel for review later. So if you missed it today, no big deal. You can watch it after the fact. But we do appreciate you coming live because, of course, then you can ask us questions directly. So we are just about in an hour. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. If there are no other questions, again, I'll give you a pause here and wait a couple moments in case anybody else does have any questions they want to put in the chat. We'll just we'll pause for a moment here and let you dump them in there if you've got some. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap her up for today. Again, thanks again for coming and joining us here. I'm Hawken, as always, with TOPDON, and see you on the next webinar. And of course, please check out our YouTube videos. Thanks again.